I was at the first urban conference. It ended September the 8th, 2001, and I moved from Canada for the first time to New York City on September the 9th, 2001. You didn't have to be a genius to recognize the relationship between the hate at the Durban and the terrorism 2 days later. The war that we're encountered, not just since 2001, has many fronts. And I think one of the first and most important front is that of the world of ideas. Islamophobia has become the new battleground in this war. I think that the world of human rights has developed a weapon. I call it the human rights weapon. It's one which inverts victim and perpetrator. It's one which is designed to deflect attention from the human rights abuses by those who violate human rights. It is intended to circle the wagons, to invoke mass hysteria, which suggests to people that they're under threat, which is in fact imaginary, and to develop excuses for hatred and for terrorism. It's a tried and true formula after all, isn't it? To create imaginary enemies, to exaggerate what is a kernel of truth, and to divert attention from the real violations in our midst. This is the phenomenon that surrounds the rise of allegations of Islamophobia. The idea is to define victims. And let me give you an example of that. Essentially, Muslims have become in many ways the new Jews. The analogy is very deliberate, so that in the September of only last month, the Human Rights Council heard the following speech by Pakistan, speaking on behalf of the organization of the Islamic Conference. Muslims are being demonized and dehumanized as Jews were in the interwar period in the last century. Algeria said that the campaign against Muslims, racial and religious hatred and violence in Europe, legitimated through a twisted vision of freedom of expression, is reminiscent of anti-Semitic campaigns in the 1920s and 30s. So the idea is to turn anti-Semitism on its head, to make Muslims the new Jews. And after all, what is anti-Semitism according to the organization of the Islamic Conference? Not only did they analogize discrimination against Muslims or Islamophobia to anti-Semitism, they actually said that anti-Semitism is about Arabs and Muslims. So the consequence of this is to then move on to the stage of, well, if Muslims are the Jews of the 21st century, what's the shape and form of that discrimination? The Danish cartoon episode has proved to be the kind of the catalyst for a hysterical, one cannot use a better word, exaggeration of the problems faced by the Muslim community. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of that, also drawn from the Human Rights Council in September. Egypt said, the episode of the offensive publication of portraits of Prophet Muhammad has highlighted the damage that freedom of speech, if left unchecked, may lead to, hurting the religious feelings of more than 1 billion people. Or Syria said that this episode of freedom of opinion was used to insult hundreds of millions of Muslims all over the world and to humiliate Islam. Now, the idea that that episode of a few cartoons in a newspaper, no offense to Denmark, but is 2/3 of the way to the North Pole, is of course preposterous. And it has very specific consequences. It's not just idle chit-chat. So that the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution called Defamation of Religions on the basis of this. This has happened in this year. This resolution was adopted by a vote which saw every Western democracy vote against, but was adopted nonetheless. And it says, noting with deep concern the increasing trend in recent years of statements attacking religions, Islam and Muslims in particular, and then it goes on to express concern over various forms of this. But what's interesting is this resolution called Defamation of Religions only mentions one religion. Islam is the only religion that apparently is subject to defamation in the world today. The inexorable push towards isolated view of human rights violations is most obviously indicated by another resolution which is adopted in September 28th, again over the objection of every Western democracy, in which the UN decided to rename the Anti-Discrimination Unit of the Office of the UN High Commissioner. The unit shall now be called the Anti-Racial Discrimination Unit, and its operational activity shall focus exclusively on racism, racial discrimination, and xenophobia. So you can't even do general anti-discrimination work in the context of the Anti-Discrimination Unit. Now it's only going to be about religion, and which feeds back to their definition of religious discrimination, which highlights Islam and Muslims in particular. So that essentially the human rights system of the United Nations, which is very vast, is translated into 6 languages, webcast around the world, has been hijacked. There is no other word for it. And the cri de coeur is Islamophobia.